Let's now have a look at the starting position for the four main parties based on the result from the 2010 general election. Now, as you can see, the Conservatives got more than 27,000 votes. They secured a very healthy majority of more than 16,000 over Labour in second place. Now, you'll note how small UKIP's vote was in 2010. I think we can expect that number to go up pretty significantly tonight. Whether enough to win is the question. Here's a percentage share from 4 years ago. Conservatives getting well over half the vote, secured 53.9%, whereas UKIP were way down on under 4% of the vote. And you can see there the swing required is 15.8% for Labour to take the seat.
Just one thing to mention, it's quite interesting. As we heard there from the Liberal Democrats, Labour too are saying that in fact their vote may have been affected by UKIP in a roundabout way. They're saying that in fact the Conservatives have been asking people to vote for them to try and block UKIP. So they're taking Labour and the Liberal votes who are going to the Conservatives to block UKIP. So some sort of tactical protest voting going on, all very complicated, but all a mark of how much the political landscape's changed just in the last 4 years.
Now to what looks like being the battle tonight between the Conservatives, who hold the seat with a big majority, and UKIP, the insurgent challenger. How, if we look at the Eastleigh by-election result, how do we use that to judge UKIP's performance tonight?
Well, I think certainly Eastleigh provides us with an interesting benchmark because Eastleigh is the best UKIP performance in any parliamentary by-election so far. They got just under 28% of the vote. The opinion polls, such as we've had in this constituency, suggest they might be on the edge of this. And I think, in truth, if UKIP get more than they got in Eastleigh, and given that unlike Eastleigh, they don't have much of a record of local activity in Newark until the last couple of years or so, I think they will be able to claim in some sense a moral victory. And I certainly think we should remember that, as it were, the claims that if UKIP don't win this constituency, it will be a big reverse are frankly exaggerated. They require a 25% swing to win this seat. There have only been 8 by-elections since 1945 where the swing has been of that size or bigger.
So Diane James, what do you say to that? 30% of the vote would be all right?
I'd be absolutely delighted with 30%. I'd like to see more, obviously, but it would take away what I currently hold, which is the best by-election result for UKIP.
Remind me what your share of the vote was?
Just below 28% at Eastleigh, just below.
Right.
And we were, I think it was 3% off the Liberal Democrats, but we were talking 1,500 votes or so.
But in a way, you've set the benchmark now, because you came a very strong second.
Correct.
In Eastleigh. So Mr. Helmer, your candidate, he has to come a very strong second, an even stronger second.
And I would be absolutely delighted to hand that mantle over to him, I can tell you.
Do you think that you would have had a better chance of coming a strong second, if that's what you do? We don't know yet. You may still win if you'd picked a stronger candidate.
That's a bit like saying the Conservatives should have put Boris Johnson into that seat and fought Newark. No, we went through a process. We were very happy with Roger Helmer. He's well known in that part of the world. Originally, as everyone will admit, elected as Conservative, defected to UKIP a few years back. Very well known and recently very successful in the European elections.
Comes with a lot of heavy baggage and controversial views, though, doesn't he? Views from, in some ways, a bygone age.
There's an awful lot of people out there that share those views, and he's not ashamed of them. He's given his explanation, and I think the insult then is to an awful lot of voters if you're then saying that just because he's made a point, and others agree with that point, that it's something that he should be very criticised for.
Do you share his view that the NHS should fund gay cure therapy?
I'm not actually sure he said that, Andrew, if you check absolutely accurately.
We say to the person who wants a change from a man to a woman or vice versa, please do that on the NHS. We say to this guy, referring to homosexuals, that's wicked, you're not allowed to think about that.
Well, I don't believe he actually said that, but I'm happy to be corrected. I'll be happy to be corrected.
Well, we have the whole quote here from the Daily Mail, and he's never challenged
it. From where's the source?
Well, it's a Daily Mail quoted last week. It's not been challenged.
Okay, I think it has been challenged. I think our press office has actually issued
a challenge. His press officer has.
No, our press office has.
A victory for the Conservatives would be the first time that we'd won a by-election as a governing party in 25 years. You know, so being able to win a by-election when you're in government, when obviously, you know, there's protest votes about, that is a big achievement.
Well,
We've
no,
gone-
when you're in
you
a
know,
desert, which you are in by-election victories, a cup of water is always grateful.
No,
but it
no,
doesn't
we've-
stop UKIP in its tracks.
Yeah, of course. I mean, UKIP have been saying that they're going to win.
We have not
Roger
said that.
Helmer said at the weekend he thought he was going to win.
When have they said they're going to win?
Well, Diane got very close to it just now, but even,
well,
but
but
even
she didn't
before,
say it.
no, but
No,
even
I didn't.
before then, but even this weekend, Nigel Farage said that he was going to turn what was an earthquake into a
I think you're confusing
into,
the
into
European
something
elections.
more. No, after the European elections, he said that was an earthquake, and now we're going to have something even greater. You know,
Well, there's a big difference between saying that's a win.
UKIP have
If
been
they don't, but still come a decent second, where does that leave UKIP now in what has become in England, joining Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland as a four-party system?
Well, it is a multi-party system at the moment, but I think they've got a big mountain to climb to become credible as a Westminster party. They haven't won they haven't got an MP elected.
Let me come back to the point I started with you, John Ashworth. You heard John Curtis reel off a host of seats that you did win with this sort of swing in by-elections, and tonight you're not in contention.
No, I don't think we are in contention. Look, I'm disappointed about that.
Why are you not?
Because I think this is a rock-solid Tory seat.
But
I've
John
been a-
Curtis reeled off rock-solid Tory seats that you won in by-elections with swings similar to the one you would need to win tonight.
but John-
Have you stopped the UKIP insurgency in its tracks if you win?
I think UKIP is beyond that point. I think this is important for the Conservatives. I think to win a by-election is very good for morale, for positioning for the general election. But UKIP has become a very powerful force in British politics. It's got a strong base in the European Parliament. It's got a growing base in local government. And I don't think one by-election, however cheering that is, allows us to dismiss UKIP for the future.
Diane James, would you be interested in at least exploring the idea of a pact with the Conservatives?
Myself personally, no.
Because
No interest, because I don't trust David Cameron. I don't trust the Conservatives. I don't trust the issues that have just been outlined. We've got real problems with national debt. We've got a whole series of issues that have been covered up. There was awful lot of bad news, which the Conservatives chose during the European elections results to hide. And I don't think
you both want a referendum on Europe.
we want a referendum on Europe. We believe we can deliver a referendum on Europe ultimately, and we've made that promise, that commitment. We haven't made an empty pledge, and we haven't had
But
a
you
leader.
can't deliver.
We
Only
haven't. Just
the
1 minute,
Conservatives can
Andrew.
deliver.
I tell you what. Let me finish, Andrew, please, if you wouldn't mind. We haven't got a leader who said one thing when it suits him to get votes in the general election, only to renege on that pledge a little while later, a few months later.
So the difference. Explain to me how UKIP delivers a referendum.
If we get anywhere between 30, 40, 50, some people forecast 60 MPs, the general, yes, there are people out there saying those sort of figures. You don't ask me whether I think that's plausible or not. I'm just giving you what I'm hearing. Then it could well be that we hold the balance of power. And Nigel made that point very, very recently.
When he was pushed on, surely if you want a referendum, then why are you opposing Conservatives who are proposing a referendum? He said he was convinced that between now and the general election, Labour would propose a referendum.
Let's put into context, why have Conservative voters walked away from the Conservative Party? They have walked away because they no longer believe in what David Cameron says. They don't believe he will deliver on his pledge. He hasn't delivered on a whole series of others. And from that perspective, he's lost credibility in their eyes. Nigel Farage and UKIP at the moment has that trust, has that credibility, and if that wasn't there, why have we done so well in the European election?
I want a referendum, and then I'll be campaigning to vote yes, but I suspect Jacob will be campaigning to vote no.
Let's ask Jacob Rees-Mogg. Even if Mr. Cameron came back from Brussels with a decent set of powers repatriated to Westminster, would you still vote to leave?
The touchstone for me will be immigration. If we get the removal of the free movement of people and have control of our own borders returned to the United Kingdom, then I could see myself voting to stay in. If we don't get that, I will vote to leave.
Given what you've just heard Diane James say, UKIP could only possibly contemplate such a pact if it were of a scale that probably ensured the Conservatives did not have an overall majority, and that therefore they would have to rely on UKIP to remain in power, and that they would then indeed have the bargaining power to ensure that the Conservative Party didn't do a Howard Wilson trick of a relatively mild renegotiation and then tell the public it's all fine.
We've got the UKIP candidate. I think we can go to New York and have a word with him. Roger Helmer there. He was chosen when the Patrick Mercer, the outgoing Tory MP, had to resign somewhat in disgrace. Mr. Helmer stepped forward. Some were expecting Mr. Farage, but we've got Mr. Helmer there. So have you won?
We don't know yet. We know that the Conservatives and UKIP are way ahead of everybody else, but we are awaiting the count and we'll get a result in a couple of hours.
If you haven't won, what would you still think was a good result for you?
Well, we think we've had a cracking campaign. We think we're probably going to get the best by-election result we have ever seen. Either we will win or we will be very close on the heels of the Conservative Party. And either way, that's an enormous rebuff for the Prime Minister, who's been to the Newark constituency on 4 occasions, thrown the kitchen sink at it, sent vast numbers of his people. And it's worth noting that the people he sent were whipped to attend, whereas the hundreds of UKIP supporters who came to work with us were volunteers who came because they believe in what we're doing.
But why in the final days of the campaign was your leader, Mr. Farage, not in Newark, but in Malta, giving a speech?
Well, perhaps because the Conservatives are a bit more worried than we are. Nigel came to a wonderful rally that we had last Saturday in this very room in which I'm speaking now, and he is here today and has been with us through polling day and has provided us enormous support.
But why wasn't he there for the final push in the last 48 hours of the campaign?
Well, because he had other work to do.
What, more important than getting you elected in Newark?
He has lots and lots of calls on his time. He's the leader of our party. He's
Sure.
the leader of our group in the Parliament. He is the leader of our delegation to the European Parliament. He's got a lot of different things to do.
I perfectly understand that, Mr. Helmer, but what could be more important to the leader of UKIP than getting you to win your first ever by-election?
We have a good machine here. We have a good campaign manager. I hope some people will think we've had a good candidate. And we've had great support from our party leader.
Let me just ask you this. Where do you think that you're taking the votes? Where are your votes coming? Because you had very few votes in 2010. I think under 2,000. You're going to get a lot more than that. This time, where?
Yes. Well, they're coming from across the board, and I think that's what makes UKIP different. The sort of received media wisdom is that we're the Conservative Party in exile and that we're a threat mainly to the Conservative Party. The experience we have is that we're taking former Conservative voters, we're taking former Labour voters, and we're very excited that we're taking votes from a lot of people who tell us they haven't voted for 10 years, haven't voted for 20 years, but at last they're hearing something they can believe in.
Have you enjoyed being a by-election candidate?
It's been a fantastic experience. It's been an extremely tiring experience. I don't think I've ever worked so intensively over so long a period, because, of course, it's been 2 elections. I think I've worked solidly for 6 weeks and had about 1 day off in the whole course of that time. But, yes, it's been a whole lot of fun, and it's been hugely exciting, and we're looking forward to the results tonight.
If you haven't won tonight, will you fight Newark in the general election?
We're concentrating on this election at the moment. Let's get that result under our belt before we start looking into next year.
But this election is over bar the result. So will you fight Newark in the general election if you haven't won tonight?
Well, I'm not making any announcement about that until we see tonight's result.
All right. Thank you very much. Oh, but just before you go, mark our card for us. Do you have any idea when we're going to get the result?
Well, people are telling me about 3 o'clock, but I'm sure your people are telling you too, so I'm not sure my information is any better than yours.
No, our people are telling us 3 or even later, indeed. So you're singing from the
later than 3?
Perhaps. So, and that's assuming no recount.
I'm not booked for any morning media until 20 past 6 in the morning, so I guess that's okay.
Well, it may still be us then at 20 past 6 if you carry on like this.
we may go right through. We may go right through.
All right. We hope to speak to you later, nevertheless, when we get the result. Roger Helmer, thank you for joining us for now.
Thank you very much indeed.
Good to have you, because we know you've just got to the count recently. Have you won?
no, the Conservatives will hold this seat, but what UKIP will do is to score their best ever percentage score in a by-election. It's going to be up over 30%. And given, you know, we were 25,000 votes behind the Conservatives here in 2010, and it's now going to be something like 2,500. So, you know, we are very, very pleased with our performance.
So just to clarify, in your view, the Tory majority will be how big, do you think?
Well, I think it'll be down to 2,000 to 3,000, something like that.
And what, I understand that you still consider that a decent result for UKIP in all the circumstances, but why do you think you haven't won it?
Well, you know, if the scores on the doors, as we look at them now, are right, and the UKIP vote share is up nearly 30%, you know, we're very difficult to think we could have done much better. It's been a very short by-election. We couldn't mobilise anybody until after the European elections, and so we've really had 10 days at this. The Conservatives have probably put more into this than any by-election they've ever fought in their history. No, all round, I can assure you that the People's Army are going to be very happy with this result tonight.
You are happy? You're not? There must be a nagging disappointment, though, that you haven't pulled it off. Given your local election results and then the European election results, this would have given you some incredible momentum if you'd won tonight.
Yeah, I think the important thing for us is that 10 days ago, everybody said, well, look, the UKIP result in the European elections won't carry through to Westminster elections, and what this by-election shows actually is there are people out there now who aren't lending their vote to UKIP in European elections, they are UKIP voters.
And just to clarify, you don't even think it will be close enough for you to insist, or Mr. Helmer to insist on a recount?
I don't think so, no. I think there will be a clear majority for the Conservatives, but as I say, a big, big second place for UKIP, and we come big seconds in Labour-held seats, in Lib Dem-held seats, and in Tory-held seats. And the other thing worth noting is the turnout today is the highest it's been at a by-election for many years. And the reason for that is a lot of people who are non-voters, who haven't voted for 20 years or never in their lives, were going out today to vote for UKIP.
All right. Just a question or point I was making to Mr. Helmer, your candidate. If it was if the result is quite close, but you've come a strong second, if I can put it that way. Why were you not there in the constituency for the final push in the last couple of days?
Well, I've been here today. I was here on Saturday. I was going to come on Sunday, but I had a chance to do national television. You know, I keep being told that I've got to be here every day. I should be the candidate in every by-election. UKIP is about a lot more than Nigel Farage, and we've proved that in the Newark by-election.
But to have won tonight would have been another earthquake, in your own language, and that final push could have made all the difference. You are the household name now of UKIP. Mr. Helmer isn't. I'm just slightly puzzled that you wouldn't have put the final push in.
Well, should I have been here for the last 5 days, 10 days, 20 days, 30 days? Should I have been the candidate? I mean, they're the sort of questions that people have been asking me. Look, we have fought a damn good campaign here with a first-class candidate, and the People's Army of UKIP is getting more professional and better at fighting elections. And all I can say is roll on the next by-election.
What were you doing in Malta?
Speaking, an engagement I accepted 8 months ago. I never break my word. If I say yes to something, I try and honour it.
Where does the self-styled People's Army go from here, Nigel Farage?
Well, it keeps on marching. We've got some work to do. We've got to get our domestic manifesto right, which we intend to launch the outline of that in September in Doncaster at our conference. I've got to get some new spokesmen and spokeswomen in place to show a much broader face of UKIP on the media, rather than people saying it's just a one-man band. And we've got to get, selecting candidates, particularly for our target seats for 2015. So a lot of organisation, a lot of work to do over the course of the summer, but the People's Army ready for the next by-election, and who knows, that could be in South Cambridgeshire if Andrew Lansley becomes a European Commissioner.
All right, and you maybe not have seen this, but on the Daily Politics, what I must now call yesterday, when I asked Mr. Lansley if he was in contention for that, he didn't quite answer, but I said if he was asked to do so, what would he say? And he said he would say yes to Mr. Cameron. So you may get your by-election down there, but we shall see.
Yeah, I think it's very likely.
Nigel Farage, thanks for joining us. We'll be back to New York, of course, but thanks for
Alex,
now. Nigel Farage was quite explicit with us. They've come a good second, but they've lost. The Tories have won. Are you in a position to confirm that?
No, not quite yet. I wouldn't be as brave as Nigel Farage, not just on that front, but on many other fronts as well.
Diane James, John Curtis mentioned earlier on that the polling showed that your voters are quite pessimistic. Why is that?
Well, that's not my experience. I mean, just like others here this evening, I was out canvassing, campaigning in Newark. That's not what I picked up at all. If I go back to the situation also during the European elections, some of the local election campaigning I did, and also EC last year, people I was talking to, they're not pessimistic. They are realistic. They are pragmatic. What they are signalling and what they were giving back to us was that, you know, the other three parties have lost it for them.
But there is an element, therefore, of protest in the vote. I'm not saying you're just a protest party, but in any insurgent party, there's an element of protest. You attract votes from people who are unhappy with the existing mainstream parties. And protest is usually caused by being pessimistic. Protest vote is because you are unhappy with the current state of affairs.
Well, the comment I would make, and it's a comment that I was hearing and others within UKIP keep hearing, is that if you take all of the other three Westminster parties, recognition now that we're the fourth, there was nothing that they could differentiate between the Conservatives, Labour and Liberal Democrats. So you might want to call it protest. I understand where you're coming from. But I think the point the voters were making was to say, we can either go for one of those three, but we can't differentiate anything between them, or we can go for something new and something that we actually understand what their message is, and we like the message that we're hearing from them, and they are receptive to what we're giving back, and that's why they're going to come into UKIP.
Nigel Farage mentioned that you're now going to have to sit down and hammer out a proper manifesto. Indeed,
like all of the three parties, that's correct.
That's absolutely right. And he wants it to be very different from the last manifesto,
Correct.
which he's already disowned himself from. What's the most important, other than your commitment to a referendum so you can vote to get Britain out of the EU, what is the most important policy you would like to see in that manifesto?
Myself personally.
Correct, not the party yourself.
The NHS. I think the state of the NHS at the moment under the coalition government is in an absolutely calamitous state.
Right, but what would be your policy?
Well, I'm not going to give anything away. Nigel made the point, please, Andrew, that we will launch our policy, our manifesto at the Doncaster conference. All of the other parties will do the same.
Sure.
I'm not going to be giving you what is
But simply
currently
to say
work in
the
progress.
NHS is not a policy. The NHS is an abbreviation.
Okay, National Health Service. What is happening and what
That's not a policy either.
What is needed to deliver good primary and secondary care? One of the points we have made, I'd be happy to be drawn on this point, which is something voters are saying. They are fed up with the level of bureaucracy and the number of bureaucrats, managers, number crunchers, whatever you want to call them, in the NHS. They actually want medics, they want nurses. And if that's something we can incorporate into a policy, I think that will be a good news story.
Some of your party have talked about charging to see a GP.
No, we have not.
That fella Nuttall has gone on his website, hasn't
No,
he?
well, let's put this into context. It was one of your Labour MPs that's actually suggested in the last few weeks putting an extra % on national insurance to actually...
He's the deputy leader, though, this fellow who's got on his website, isn't he?
Do you know what
Frank Field is not the deputy leader of the Labour Party. Probably will never will be, I suspect.
Okay, well, I'd be interested for the Labour Party to explain to me how they're going to make hypothecated taxation and suddenly put 1% when, as Matthew will actually admit, we're trying to grow the economy and we're trying to get people out of
policy
taxation.
to charge to see a GP?
No, it's not.
You don't seem to get it. 86% in the most recent poll, I think it was in the last few days, 86% of UKIP voters are going to stick with UKIP for the next general election. They've stated that. They're not going to come back. I don't even agree with Jacob in terms of small c politics here. UKIP's here to stay. It's taking voters from all of the three parties. The Lib Dems, yes, I think they're just a spent force. That happens to be my opinion. But it's almost this selective hearing that the Conservative Party's got, which is, we don't understand. We don't even want to hear that UKIP is a new force on the political scene.
All right, I want to go back to New York in just a minute. Before I do, John Curtis has been listening, he's been smiling wisely there, looking inscrutable. I want to get a quick reaction from John before we go back to New York. John.
Well, a couple of points I want to make. The first is we've heard an awful lot this evening about how this is the first time that a Conservative government has held on to a by-election for an awfully long time. Can I just remind us that the Labour Party, when it was in power between 1997 and 2010, did actually manage to hold on to 18 seats during that period. So in truth, in being told this statistic, we're being told as much about the poor performance of past Conservative governments rather than something that's inevitable about governments in general. Second thing I want to make, however, is can I just remind both Conservative and the Labour parties that at the last general election, the last occasion when we were told it was a choice between either Conservative or Labour, only 2/3 of the electorate actually voted for either Conservative or Labour, and that proportion has been in long-term decline. And I think we should not therefore necessarily assume that simply saying to voters, well, you might like UKIP, but at the end of the day, it's a waste of time voting for them, and you've got to vote for one or other of us, is going to work anymore for an electorate which has become increasingly willing to vote for parties other than the traditional Westminster parties.
The other three Westminster parties, they claim they are listening. That's a bit like saying we're listening but we're not hearing. They're not prepared to tackle what voters want to tackle. And if I go back to the campaign in the European election, just to give you an example, Andrew, I had my Labour colleague and my Conservative colleague trialling their general election message. They didn't want to talk about European issues. If you compared that with what were the UKIP papers, and the pamphlets and everything about our messaging, we were prepared to talk about Europe, about the issues associated with European membership, and that's what voters wanted to talk about.
But I'll come to you in a second. In your judgment, though, how much is the recent success of UKIP down to your core belief, which is anti-EU, or a more generalised disillusion with the political establishment?
I think it's a combination of both. Andrew.
Right, I understand that, but can you give us a balance between one and the other?
Can I put my answer in the context of the Eastleigh by-election? And I appreciate that's now 13 months ago.
It's the one you fought.
We started off that campaign in terms of that core message out of the EU. Simple as that. It only took a matter of days before voters in Eastleigh were saying, actually, I know where my problem is. I know why I can't get my children into school. I know why I can't get to an NHS appointment. I know why I'm on, way down the list on the housing ladder, or the housing, trying to get a home of some description. And they were able to link that to EU membership. Now, one of the issues that the Labour Party's got is that they don't understand or won't appreciate that their core vote is being hit by individuals who now can't get a job, or they've got wages that have been brought down because of low-skilled immigration under the EU freedom of movement aspect. And the Conservative colleagues, they're still on a different planet over
this. But that's why we want to tackle some of these abuses in the Labour market.
But,
you don't want to cut the numbers, though, do you?
The problem, there's selective deafness across the other three Westminster parties. It is there. How many times do European commissioners and Angela Merkel, even when she came and addressed the House of Commons, how many times did they have to say the message, there is no chance of renegotiation. And we've even had that this week with this whole issue with the Conservative Party is now tying itself up in knots with in terms of the appointment of Mr Juncker.
Used to be a Conservative out of interest. Were you
No, I have voted...
Conservative voter or what?
No, I've only ever belonged, and this question, let's clear it up, I've only ever been a member of one political party, which is UKIP. I have in the past voted both Conservative. I'm on record as saying I've voted for a Liberal Democrat who was a very, very good candidate locally, and I've also voted Independent. So I'm one of your floating voters, if you like, unless David Cameron, and let's say Ed Miliband as well, includes it in their manifestos and make an absolute commitment. And the coalition government's avoided it yet again with the most recent Queen's speech. Voters will turn around and say, why is it not there? Because you stated it would be. You've stated that you will give us a referendum. Why are you not including it? And if they just keep on chasing this tin down the road, which is what the Conservatives are fond of doing, voters are going to not support them. Some of what you just said is absolutely predicated on the Eurozone turning itself around. And we've heard even today...
just really lumbering along as it goes.
Or it goes into sheer deflation. That's one aspect. So that could be an issue there. If that is the case, young people, particularly from the southern Mediterranean countries, are still going to be coming here. because only the United Kingdom offers them a job opportunity.
Well,
If
and Germany.
Yeah, okay. Now, if they come here, even under this coalition government, we're not creating jobs at such a rate that will deal with the 1 million, nearly 1 million young people who are not in employment, educational training.
Hold on.
And we're not, excuse me, please don't interrupt. And the other aspect is we're not dealing with the major level of unemployment across the country. You can't have it both ways.
Here we go. Here is the returning officer. Let's get the results.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the declaration for the Newark constituency by-election. Helmer Roger, UK Independence Party, UKIP, 10,028. Payne Michael, Labour Party candidate, 6,842. Watts David Kenneth, Liberal Democrat, 1,004. Jenrick Robert Edward, the Conservative Party candidate, 17,431.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I too should like to thank the acting returning officer and his staff who have made this event possible and have worked so hard. I should like to thank all those UKIP supporters, activists and campaigners who have been here in this town of Newark and have been working so hard over recent weeks. And I would recall that they came not because they were whipped, as the Conservative activists were to come, but they came voluntarily to do what they believed in. I should like to thank all those directly involved in the campaign, especially my campaign manager, Paul Oakton, who has done an outstanding job, and our constituency chairman, Peter Weston Davis, my colleagues from the European Parliament who have been here to campaign as well. Now, of course, we stood in this election hoping to win and planning to win, and we have not won, but we are encouraged by the fact that we have increased our share of the vote since the general election by a factor of 6, and we have halved the Conservative majority. That is a great sign for the future of our party and for our intention to take our campaign ahead to next year, to the general election, on a targeted basis to establish a bridgehead in Westminster. This is what we intend to do. This is what the future holds for our party. So again, I thank all of those who have supported us, and I would like to thank particularly the winning candidate, both on winning and also for conducting a very reasonable and courteous campaign in a way that I cannot use those words of sections of the media who have produced some scurrilous misrepresentation, and I have to say 1 or 2 Labour leaflets also produced comparable scurrilous misrepresentation. I think today all those MPs, not only of the Conservative Party but also of the Labour Party, because recall that we have had spectacular by-election results also in Labour heartland constituencies. We are reaching parts of the country that other parties cannot reach. Any of those with a majority of less than 6,000 or 7,000 had better go to bed a bit worried tonight. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, although I should have liked to have the privilege of representing the town of Newark in Westminster, I take some comfort from the fact that I will continue to have the opportunity in future years of representing not only Newark but Nottinghamshire and the East Midlands in the European Parliament. Thank you very much.
Basically, the decline in the Conservative vote in this by-election is more or less on a par with what's been going on in the rest of this Parliament. It's basically a more or less average performance, and that therefore we can't come away from this and say, here are the green shoots of Conservative electoral recovery, such that the party might be going back up to where it was a couple of years ago. It's true Labour's lead is narrow, but the reason why Labour's lead is narrower now than 2 years ago is because Labour support has fallen. It is not because Conservative...
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.